All right, a very good evening, Kenyans and our viewers, wherever you are watching us from. Your right on time as we premiere the Governance Digest here on CAC TV, as we talk matters to do with governance, dissecting government policies and also digesting what it means to have policies that shape the future of this country. We'll be talking matters to do with politics. We'll also be talking matters to do with governance, all cutting across education, security, and all manner of topic or discussions that impact the Kenyan people. A very warm welcome. My name is Chris Sambo, and I will be your host, taking this show in a drive. Of course, talking matters to do with what the government is doing so far, what the government will be doing, and what future governments will have to do for them to better the lives of Kenyans. This is why we bring to you the Governance Digest as it premieres this particular Thursday, and we'll be talking about a very sensitive topic that has been a talk of the country: the fear of Kenyans being taxed, the fear of taxation among Kenyans. The Finance Act coming strongly, to put measures of taxation in a bid to help the government raise revenue to run this country. What does it mean when the courts suspend that particular act in terms of government execution and implementation of its project? That is our conversation this evening, and I want to introduce my guest here in studio this evening. And on my near right is Samuel Kabuchwa. He is a politician. Samuel, karibu sana.
Thank you, sir.
And good to have you on the first episode of this particular great show.
Wow, great, Chris. Thank you. And good evening, viewers. My name is Samuel Kabuchwa, as you've heard. I am a politician from Laikipia County, and I am grateful for this discussion and being a pioneer for this Governance Digest. Thank you, sir.
Right, and on the far right is Dr. Gashie. Of course, he's not a very new face in the television. Dr. Gashie, karibu sana kwenye studio zetu.
Thank you very much, and happy to be here. And I feel home. I'm Presbyterian.
You're Presbyterian, so you feel...
So I feel like someone would not want to go home because they're already home. So I say thank you again for being here to premiere the show, and I hope it's good to help build knowledge, information, and break down issues that otherwise most of Kenyans would be of interest.
Absolutely, and a very warm welcome, and also to say thank you so much for making time this evening for us to have this conversation. And because we have an hour of conversation, let's go straight to what we are to talk about this evening. And let's begin here. The mood of the country. Mr. Samuel, how would you read the mood of the country at this particular moment?
Well, Chris, frankly speaking, at the moment there is anger in the air, and there is also confusion as to which direction this country is taking. Because if you look at what is happening in this country, there is a lot of division, and especially in the political arena. Divisions that have been caused by, I can say, the leadership have missed the direction. They have missed to lead this country in the direction towards the wisdom that is required. Because what is happening in this country right now, it is not supposed to be happening if leadership will take responsibility of what is happening. And I mean, when I mean leadership, I mean across the board. So we have a lot of confusion. And that is looking at it from the dimension of a human being. But when I look at it from a spiritual dimension, we know that this country is a country that belongs to God, for sure. Dr. Gashie is a Presbyterian, I'm also a Presbyterian. And God has good plans for this country, definitely. And Kenya being a role model in terms of politics in Africa, there are so many countries in Africa that look up to us. So I am sure that God has a good plan for this country, and there is something that is going to be given birth out of the confusion that we are seeing. But it is also a dangerous time, because when times to give birth to something that will be adorable, something that will shine, to give direction to other nations, it is important to know that during the time for giving birth, we can lose the mother and lose the baby. So I would urge that we see the bigger picture and hold the country together. Thank you.
Dr. Gashie, are we in a position that we would say is the right position as of now as a country?
Well, I think I would speak from the economic point of view.
Definitely.
Globally, there have been a lot of economic meltdown. If you look at our case, sometimes we talk about what we call both macro and micro economic fundamentals. Macro is those factors that affect the economy that you don't have control. For example, we don't have a control of how much interest rate the US government or the federal government will charge. Meaning now, with that action, a lot of investment is going to the US. So there's a lot of dollars being held. So it impacts on your shilling or your currency because now it depreciates because there's not enough dollars and there's nothing you can do about it. We talk about the drought, the rains and all that. We went a spell that was the drought again. We had to mitigate about that. We had nothing to do about it. We have no control. The price of oil, we have no control. So then you go to the micro, the taxation and all that, which you have both the monetary and which you have control. So looking at it is the cost of living is a bit elevated because inflation is almost at there's a time it was at almost at 9.5, meaning that if you had 100 shillings within the year, it depreciates by almost 10 shillings. So that which you are buying at 100 shillings, you must buy at 110. If you had savings in the bank, your 10,000 becomes 9,000. So, and the cost of foodstuff, when the cost of foodstuff, or what we call your dinner, your dinner table, what you use at your dinner table, becomes expensive. It affects a lot of others. So, where we are then, if you look at the economic outlook, we might have some relief with harvest in November, October. There's a lot of food stuff. I think people now are harvesting beans and all that. So maybe we might have a short-term relief when we get to do the harvesting and all that. However, my projection as an authority, I always keep to have a little economic growth. That is when the GDP is growing and people are saying, I have something in the pocket. That will be about maybe beyond 2025. On a midterm, maybe end of 2024, we might get a bit of relief. That is if we have enough short lanes and enough long lanes in 2024. Meaning by the time 2024 November, when we get to harvest, maybe we might be in a better place.
And before I come to you, Samuel, you've talked about, having to wait until 2025. That is what is agitating Kenyans, and they're wondering, for how long should we wait? And when the Kenya Kwanza government was, putting out the economic plan, they laid out certain foundations that we would resolve issues and things affecting the Kenyan people shortly, once we get into the office. From where you said, did the current government underrate the current economic situation that was in the country?
I will not say so. I keep saying whoever would have won, we're still in the same position. Because remember we talked about the macro fundamentals. By the time KK government was winning or Azimio would have won, we had the drought. The price of fuel was high. The dollar issue and the shillings was still the same. So what the Kenya Kwanza government did is they came with a plan, but within the plan there is what we call the holding assumption. When every time you do a plan, there is always the holding assumptions. If the assumption holds, then you become successful. And I think one of holding assumption was immediately after August elections, they are going to be laying in October and December, meaning there will be a harvest in January. That will be within 100 days. You have harvested, you have enough to eat, so the price of unga and everything goes down. That's why they had given fertilizer subsidy then. However, the assumption did not hold. Just like the way they have the strategy about the oil, buying oil and paying after 6 months in September, is due in September. The assumption was when we bring in oil, and since we use 30% of our forex to import oil, we are going to hold 30% of our dollars. So the Kenya shilling will appreciate against the dollar. However, having brought the oil, the assumption has not held. So I will not say that they are deleted. It's only that the key holding assumption, or what we normally say, holding all the factors constant, did not hold. And it happens in any planning. So I will not say that they are deleted, but some of the key assumptions have not held. Yes.
Samuel,
yes.
Dr. Gashi is bringing out very technical, and,
yes.
and very substantive, view of the economic evaluation of the KK government.
Okay.
The feeling of the Kenyan people is that this should be resolved as soon as possible.
Exactly.
And Dr. Gashi, from where he sits as an authority, talks about 2024, 2025.
Yeah.
The feeling of the Kenyan people is that we are trying to fill a long-term gap in a short while by overtaxing. Is that the feeling of the Kenyan people?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Daktari, and congratulations for your appointment as the economic advisor Nairobi County.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
By Governor Sakaja. He's an authority, and I have a lot of respect for professionals when they explain about how things are. Because when the explanations are genuine and backed by good faith, then we have a reason to believe them. But a story is given, Chris, of two people who decided to walk for a long journey. One happens to be a young man who was knowledgeable and a professional, and the other one was an old man. And they were traveling for a long journey, and when darkness caught up with them, they decided to pitch a tent and sleep. And in the middle of the night, the old wise man woke up and looked up, and he saw the stars and the moon. And he woke up the young man, professional. And the professional, when he woke up, he asked him, "Look up, what can you see?" "I can see the stars and the moon and the galaxies." Then the old man asked the young professional, what is the meaning of all this? And the professional started explaining in terms of scientific explanation, the galaxy, the million light years to get there. And the old wise man said, "Hold. The meaning of all this is that our tent has been stolen. Our tent has been stolen. We pinched a tent yesterday. We were not seeing the moon. We were not seeing the stars. So the reason as to why we are seeing is because someone stole our tent." Now, some of the explanation that we've been getting in this country as to where we are right now, it started in 1963. We were told that in 1963, Daktari, that we were in the same economic level with guys like Malaysia, Singapore, and the rest. Then, why are we not there? So has the rain started beating us now that there are prices that has escalated, Why are we not seeing these stars that we are seeing right now? And why are we here, If you look at where we are and those guys where they are from 1963, then we missed the route somewhere. And I think that is the fundamental things that we need to answer ourselves as Kenyans, because we won't be here. And I think from my own view, someone stole our tent. Where is our resources? Where is our money? Because if we have our money, then we wouldn't be seeing what we are seeing. I'm trying to say this country's resources have been siphoned. And that one the Mwananchi knows. Because we are living in a dispensation of information technology. And the Mwananchi down there right now, he's able to get even sensitive information from the government, and he's able to tell what is happening. The sweeper in the office, that watchman, they are now graduates. The Kenya of 2023 is not the Kenya of 1990. People are aware of what is happening. And that is why you see it's no longer business as usual. People are rioting. There is anger because they can tell we have a problem. Yeah.
Dr. Gashie, The short-term solution, for the KK government has been to try and lay a base of trying to raise revenue. What they talk about is the revenue that is going to help them implement certain policies that will help the Kenyan people. But should Kenyans be worried about the measures that have been put in place in the short term in terms of taxation?
Well, we normally say you cannot grow the economy of the country organically. Organically meaning through taxation. All the government does is to create conducive environment where enterprise thrive. And when the enterprise thrive, you pay more taxes, and then there is a lot of growth which is driven by the private sector. However, the hole that we are in and where our tent was stolen is that we overborrowed beyond our means. It's just like a household. If you spend more than what you earn, meaning you must get an extra shilling from either the bank, from a friend, from a Shylock, or you have to make sure that your budget balances. Our budget is always, for the longest, I think until maybe about during President Kibaki, our budget is always in deficit, meaning we budget for what we don't have.
We don't have.
For example, we are budgeting, our budget is about 3.6 trillion. The government projects to raise a revenue, ordinary revenue, 2.5 trillion, and another 300 billion through appropriation in aid. Appropriation in aid is the money you get from the agents of the government. But they have a hole that they must fill for about 720 billion. They borrow domestically and external borrowing. So with that background, meaning that also of the revenues that we are collecting, 60%, or for every 60 shillings in 100, it's good to service the debt. So it leaves the government with a very little legroom or headroom to maneuver. How do they bridge the gap? Increase the tax. However, the problem with our Kenyan taxation is that only about 3 million people who pay are taxed, while almost the rest who are in informal sector, and we are told 80% of our employment is in informal sector. But there is no mechanism or withal or way to get them to pay. So that is why it's painful for the few who are in formal employment. So the biggest problem with our economy is the debt burden that we must pay. If we don't pay, then we are going to be in the international or the global financial bad books. Either you'll get your loan expensive, or you don't get. So that is why I'm thinking the government is giving more prevalence on paying the debt, so that we are what we call ongoing concern. So where our money went, or who stole, or where our tent is, figuratively, from my brother here, where we are seeing the star and the moon and the galaxies, is that we have a burden of
debt.
But yes, of debt, and we are the space that we are in to correct taxes is shrinking. So the government must have new strategy to broaden the taxation base. That's why maybe they are proposing a TOT, turnover tax, to the small businesses, so that they bring more people, and the digital space, so that they bring more people to pay taxation. I don't know whether I have been able to answer
definitely
your question, or I've taken you to the bush more.
You have actually answered it correctly, and on top of that, I would also want to add, you've talked about taxation, expanding the base of the taxation, but the feeling of the Kenyan people is that we are being overtaxed. As we stand, is the country now overtaxing its people? Because there has been arguably that point of if you tax high, then you decrease the base, and you have to increase the base for you to even tax more. So are we overtaxing, or rather is the government now in a situation where it's now overtaxing its people in a bid to close that gap you're talking about, for us to be able to raise the required revenue to service some of the loans and also have the ones for expenditure?
Yeah, I think so, yes. Of course, our taxation, and that's why I said there are very few people who does pay tax, who are within. So I would say yes. The tax burden is everyone can feel it, because it's the same people who are salaried formerly who are continuing to pay the taxes. So the strategy is to motivate people, those who are in the formal sector, create conducive environment so that the government may be able to correct more of taxation. Otherwise, the more it shillings, the more little of the tax or the revenue the government will get. For example, they have targeted to correct about 380 billion from the new measures in the Finance Act 2023. So that is the issue that Kenyans would want to have a relief when it comes to taxation. However, even other jurisdiction, when the country is recovering from economic meltdown, there is usually a lot of pain. But for me, I would focus more on relieving the pains on the cost of living, so that people would have some more money in their pocket. Why I was talking about 2024, 2025, I'm not a pessimist. It is grounded on fact, because if food must get cheaper, it has to be grown. For a season, it takes about 6 months to harvest, isn't it?
Definitely.
For maize, because that is our staple of food. Meaning, for the maize that we planted in April, it will hit the market or the mills in November. Beans maybe around now, vegetables are there, so the grains will hit there. So if we are going to plant again for short lanes in October, then we'll harvest in February, March. If we are to plant again in April 2024, our harvest, so that now we can have relief, assuming that they are going to be lane, we'll harvest on 2024 November. That is the discourse. Meaning, when you are going to 2025, November 2024 and 2025 is only 2 months away. So we might have relief 2025. Okay? I think that is why I'm talking to that, because globally there is no grain to import. That's why the government could not get grains from, again, there is last year Ukraine war, and there was also drought, climatic change globally. I don't know where you saw in UK, they were rationing cabbages that you buy only one, because where they import from, there is no rain. And by the time we do the dams, so that we can irrigate our agriculture, to do a dam takes about 5 years. Meaning the first dam to be complete and operational, 2023, we are talking about 2027.
So that's another election cycle.
So it's out of fact. But, by the time we have irrigated, we are no longer depending on lane-fed agriculture. It will be maybe minimum 4 years from now.
Samuel, shouldn't Kenyans just hold on the pain until things, get to a point where they are now getting smooth?
Well, going with the explanation from the experts, you can tell that holding all factors contains. Because if I may ask Dr. what happens if there are no rains? What happens? What will the government do? Maybe that one he'll answer later. But my point is this: Kenyans, I don't think they really have a problem with paying the taxes, because going by history, there was that in 2002, during the government of Mwai Kibaki, the people were very much inspired to pay taxes. They were even queuing in KRA to pay taxes. Why? Because of the level of confidence that the Kenyans had on the government then. And there is something else other than the tax that we are talking about. People will be willing even to take sacrifices to move as Kenyans. But there must be an underlying issue that is making Kenyans to feel like they are taken for granted. And I'm sorry to say this, because if you look at the platform through which the current government campaigned upon was on reduction of taxes and the lowering of the cost of living. And for sure, the guys in government, they are not strangers. They did not come from the galaxies down here. They were in the government. So at least professionally, we can say they had information of how the government was then and how the government is and was supposed to be. But there is an underlying issue here, the confidence that the people have on the government. I must say that. Because there is something that makes people, let me say, okay, the government is there, legitimately, legally it is in place. But if you look at the enjoyment of what we call the social legitimacy, going by the data on election that were given by IEBC, it was 50-50. So when they took the government, it would have been prudent for the government to send on air some reconciliation tone to bring those who oppose them on board, to minimize the negative force against them. But the tone that are in the air right now, and in the recent past, we've had a pronouncement like Company Limited. We've had that. We've also had the drumming by the opposition leaders, drumming the same pronouncement, dividing people further instead of bringing them together. That makes the public lose confidence, and they feel the platform from both divide was on reduction of costs of taxes and the lowering of the cost of living. But right now, it's escalating. So people feel like we've been shortchanged. We've been duped. Yeah. So they are helpless, and they are disappointed. So what is happening? They are ventrating. And they can only say we are not going to pay taxes. I've seen some clips around there saying we are not going to pay taxes. So for me, if you ask me, I would say let us first of all restore back the confidence to the Mwananchi. Let the promises, at least let them be fulfilled, so that at least Mwananchi can restore back the confidence. Yeah.
And talking about confidence, Dr. Gashi is talking about confidence that has to be built by the government to the people, so that they can also be, a parcel of the entire government. But you see, the government in the Finance Act targeting the 1.5 housing levy. When you target the people who are pressed hard by the economic times with an additional mode of taxation, does that have a ripple effect on your conclusive aspect of raising revenue?
Yeah, sure it does. And before I go there, I want to go back to what my brother said. And I agree that what there is what we call trust deficit. That people don't trust the government with the tax or the money they pay, based on many of reports from the Auditor General. That in and out, there is also a report of wastage, corruption, misuse, and all that. Sometimes the government is not frugal, is not efficient with what it does with the money. So then, Kenyans, or those who pay taxes, have that trust deficit. And I think it's the same that is applying to the housing levy or the taxation. That people have no problem with paying the tax, even for the housing. But they are saying, can we trust you with our money? That is why people will ask you, where is the money going to sit? What is going to do? Who will have a house and how? So when that is not well communicated also, but I also think the government has a challenge in communication and marketing of their policies and their projects. That the information that Kenyans get, it is not enough. It's hanging. People keep on asking for the missing bits. So I think that is what I would agree with my brother, that people have mistrust or deficit of trust with the government. That is why people will not be willing to pay taxes. If you go back to, I think he was talking about during Kibaki's time, people are motivated to pay for taxation because they could see where their money is going. And one of the game changer was Thika Superhighway. Okay? Thika Superhighway changed the people's mindset and perception about paying of the taxes, because for the first one within East Africa, Kenya was the premier country to have a superhighway. In fact, a lot of other ministers of roads and public works from other countries, other jurisdictions, all the way up to Ethiopia, came to see what is a superhighway in Kenya. And people were proud that it is their money which have achieved that milestone. So until as when people would see tangible infrastructural projects or goods that they can relate, that they have come from them paying taxes, they have no problem feeling the pain, bearing the pain, because they'll be looking for the future, because there are going to be better things to come. However, when we have the vibes and information that we are wasting this much, not even this current government, even the previous government, even Mwai Kibaki's government, when people feel that the tax is going to be wasteful, the government is going to be wasteful, then there is resistance in payment of taxes. And also, a lot of other people don't know what it takes to pay tax. For example, the deadline for filling in returns was last month, June 30th. You'll be surprised significantly. I saw from KLA congratulating those who return their income returns, saying, personally I saw an email saying, I'm among 6 million, I think 6.9 million of Kenyans who returned their tax income status. So we are about 50 million, if you less those who are not eligible to pay. So you'd imagine about 15 or 18 of us. I think even more, because if you go with the IBC register, for argument's sake, you're talking about 22 million Kenyans, or 24.
Around between 18 and 22.
22 million Kenyans, adults, who voted. However, only 6 million of them, which is it a third or is it 1/3? Of them voluntarily returned tax returns. So there is resistance, or there is no knowledge. Where are the others? Maybe they don't have income, but even when you don't have income, you should return zero, because you didn't earn any income. So I think is the mistrust and lack of knowledge that compound the issue of resistance to pay tax. And also, if you borrow from the Bible, you remember the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus, okay? That people could not imagine how would Jesus eat with this guy who was chasing us around to pay tax. So there was also resistance even then. And that is why the Bible says, give to what Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So it comes from long time ago. So meaning you need to motivate people to pay and show them what is it in them, for them, when they pay taxes.
No, you talked about, something?
Yes,
you talked about Zacchaeus, and among the protesters yesterday, there's one who said that does not matter how high Zacchaeus is, We will get the person gather tree.
No, there's no here, and I think we know the reference.
Yes.
And also the one who was in fact appreciated, and I actually had joked about it.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a lot that we can learn from the Bible. But maybe I want to echo Dr. Gashie's sentiment on the issue of communication and the failure of projects because of the communication. And a case in place is the housing project. One factor that determines whether a project is going to be successful is the ownership of that project by the recipient or the beneficiaries. If today you woke up and decide that I'm going to do water in a village somewhere, you just walk there and do a borehole and tell people that's your water. And you have not even involved them about it. The minute that water will even if the pump will spoil a spare of 10,000, they'll not be responsible because they have no sense of ownership. Now, if you look at the housing levy, leave alone even the part of the financing part, because it is from 1.5% of the salaried people, but you never involved the recipient, the civil servant. Yeah, that's point number one. They never owned it. And going to the recipient or the beneficiary, you must go through. There's a strategy to get to the recipient, either through the gatekeepers, and in this case maybe the union officials of civil servant, because they are the guys who first opposed this thing. And also, there must be clarity on the issue of how is this housing levy going to be implemented. One of the principles of taxation is that tax should be easy to understand. Now, I saw government officials trying to explain the issue of the housing levy. There was even a contention whether it is a levy or a tax. But at the end of it all, someone tried to explain how it's going to be implemented. I think it was a PS or something. Then, in fact, we had me and another guy we were discussing, who is a civil servant. We had to go back and look at the credentials of that guy, and he's a learned guy. But the explanation was not clear. So the guys in the civil servant whose salaries are being reduced by 1.5, walisema hii imeenda. Hii imeenda. It's like we have no confidence. This is money that is gone. And the most unfortunate thing is that even if people feel like they want to resist, tax is not a voluntary thing. It is actually a compulsory, because with the Finance Bill Act now, it is an act.
It's an act.
By the implementation of it means that whether you like it or not, you will be deducted. So you cannot say you're not going to pay. So I think the 1.5 guys who are resisting, they're crossing their fingers to the courts and saying, let's see what will happen. Yeah.
And talking about the Finance Act, I want to engage Dr. Gashie. Gashie, the Finance Act has been put on hold by the courts, and the government has argued that if we do not have this act in place and already being implemented, then it will also have a ripple effect on the country's economy in terms of collection of revenue and how we intend to implement our policies using those funds. Do you see a scenario of a government in crisis, if at all the courts agree to the petition, or rather the case stopping the implementation of the Finance Act?
Well, there might be, of course, there are going to be pain areas. Pain areas, if such happens. However, if you follow how you get into the Finance Act 2023 or any other 2021, 2022, each and every section of the bill is voted separately. Okay? So even when it goes to court, the court is going to jurisdicate on the particular sections which has been challenged as being unconstitutional. Okay? So there is a lot of rollover from 2021, 2022 Finance Act. And that is why the government is continuously correcting tax, because the government is perpetual.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop when there is a transition. That's why you continue paying a VAT for items when you go to buy from the supermarket, because the VAT Act is as old as the previous financial bills. What it does, like for VAT on fuel, that is moving from 8% to 60%, you continue correcting all any other section. So what will happen is that particular section, if the court thinks is wise to start it out, it can only strike that one out. There will not be any possibility. I'm not a lawyer, but on the financial matters, there's no prosperity that is good through all the Financial Act 2023. But if the court fights wise, maybe they might argue some of the section inside there are constitutional in nature. They needed to involve public participation. The court might also not throw out, but say, look, section 1, 2, and 3 need to go back to public participation. Then you bring it back. So whatever they think, so it will still be, we still have Financial Act 2023 and maybe missing some of the contentious issues if the court thinks so. So if some of them, like housing levy, hypothetically speaking, was to be stuck out, then all that program cannot be funded. So it has to wait until they appeal the process, until there is closure. So probably to the High Court, probably to the Supreme Court, but time is still running.
Yeah.
If the case drags to about a year, meaning you have lost 1 year on the program that you wanted to implement. So that is how it's likely to span out.
And so for us to get at that point where the government finds itself in limbo in terms of what they intended to do with the Finance Act, Kenyans raised concerns. Of course, there was a public participation in regards to the bill, and there was a report tabled by the Finance and Planning Committee, talking about what Kenyans recommended. And most of them were not of the opinion of the finance bill as it was, but the parliament in its majority agreed to what was in the Finance Act. Is that a problem made by the government itself, and now it's having to fight back in terms of the people that gave them their voice?
I am not doubting the intention of the government in relation to the finance bill and the programs that they want to fund. But when your intentions is not aligning with the need of the people at the moment, then definitely you expect some resistance. Because right now, the mwananchi down there, he is crying of reduction of cost of essential commodities like food. Now, when people don't have food in the house, and here you are telling them about the tax on housing and other things, they will not listen to you. They will resist. They will be like, it is either this government, and I am sure I'm not posing like I'm fighting it. I am I'm just commenting in good faith that they will feel like it is either it's insensitive or it's unwilling or incapable of addressing the current situation that people are having. I do not know why the issue of subsidies have been demonized, because the current government was using the strategy of subsidies to lower the cost of living, and people would feel like fuel is, it was not where it is right now. The cost of unga was not where it is now. So I don't know why it was demonized, that the cost of subsidies, the subsidy thing is not okay, because what right now the people want is just to have that relief. And then maybe later the government can see how to fill in the gaps. Number two, the current political temperature in this country. Daktari here will tell us how much we are losing when one day maandamano things and
The destruction
and the destruction and the closure of business, how much we are losing as a country. So if we do not arrest this thing, then it means we are even digging the hole deeper. So I think it's the high time our leadership to consider and maybe borrow words from the late Honorable George Saitoti, who said that there comes a time when a country is greater than any individual. And I must say this, Chris, this Kenya does not belong to Kenya Kwanza. Neither does it belong to Azimio. It is for all of us. And more importantly, the generation that is coming after us. It is the high time the leaders of this country to start thinking generational. Because if we start thinking generational, we will be able to face the challenges that are eminent about this nation. Because from where I sit, there are two challenges that we need to address. And if we don't address those ones, even the generation that is coming, they'll still have a problem. And number one is corruption. For me, corruption is a cancer that is going to slay this country down and bring it down to its knees. Today, you are celebrated. You are a hero if you steal from the government. And I'm not saying that even the directorates, if you go to the villages, having stolen from either the government institution or whatever, they say, tunataka mwizi wetu. We want our thief. Yes, he's a thief, but that is the guy we want. So I think it's a transformation so that we can deal with that challenge. The other challenge is about our environment. We need to take care of our environment because Daktari is saying, holding all factors constant, if rain comes. Now, if we destroy our environment, then I'm telling you, even the harvest, we will not have it. And you see, when we destroy our forest, for example, we are headed to, nature does not forgive. Nature does not forgive. And the generation that is coming will blame us. Will blame us. Yeah.
I don't know whether you had, because I was told we have at least 5 minutes, so you've spoken as if you're giving a parting shot,
okay.
But I will come to you for a parting shot as well. And Dr. Gachien, we've talked about the situation as it is, we've talked about the economic limbo that the government is, and also the people finding themselves agitated by the state of affairs. But what is the short-term solution? You talked about subsidy. Should the government, calm the ambitions down and revert back to at least a subsidy that reduces the temperatures on the Kenyan people, or what is the short-term solution for the government, even as we look for the long-run solutions?
Okay, well, I'm not a believer. Subsidies are good, but are short-term but very expensive. Because what we do, like for food stuff, you give subsidy to the millers. So you are giving subsidy at consumption. And where the millers are going to get this maize from, they import from Malawi, they import from Tanzania, Uganda, and everywhere. So you are growing other countries' agriculture sector. That is a problem. So you'll give about 40 billion, but none of that, almost significantly, 20 billion will be out there. So you're building the agricultural sector, On fuel, when you give subsidy on fuel, you give to the big players because they will capitalize their business, meaning they'll put money in their business until as when the government will pay. So it's a capital expenditure. And some of the independent petroleum dealers, they don't have that wide capital base, so they'll be knocked out of the market. So for the longer time, you might have almost near monopolies, maybe 3, 4, or 5 big players who are within the industry. So you have removed the independent oil marketers in Nyeri, in Nyuki, you know, who play a significant role in even regulating the price. So that is from where I sit, economic perspective. So what we need to do, if you go to the other jurisdiction like a UK, US, they give subsidy to the farmers, and even in Egypt. That is why you'll hear foodstuff from Israel, Egypt is cheaper than us, or when we are talking about Europe, that we cannot compete with them because the farmer in Europe is highly supported by the government, while our farmer is highly exposed. So if we go to the market, our farmers will fold and go. So that is where what I think about it. However, the short term for now is that we don't have any, the government does not have any headroom, because the short term was to import, but there was no grains globally. You remember, we've been told that the unga will be 150 on assumption that they are going to get maize. But there is competition globally because of last year shortage. So that was a short filling gap, but it is not there. So that's why now the government must be silent and playing that our harvest for November is adequate. What the government must do, one thing, they must manage post-harvest loss to a zero. Okay? They must buy each and every available grain, even those who are selling in debits, and they put in strategic reserve. Because they don't know whether we are going to have short or long rain. And even when we get the short rain, they must build up our strategic reserve so that when there will be droughts, we'll be able. Remember the story of 7 fat cows, and you know, so we must learn from there. So that is the long term on how we manage our food security, and also important thing is about food access. The biggest challenge is that we have people in Isiolo who are dying of hunger, and bananas are rotting in Meru town. So there is no access.
Counties, actually.
There was that, I don't know which media station that carried a story, while cabbages were not available in Nairobi, going for almost 100 apiece. People in Nyandarua, they're actually throwing them away. So the biggest discussion then is that, is it about food security or is it about food access? So we must address those two.
In equal measure.
Yeah, but being optimistic, if you look at the economic outlook, going ahead, it looks better.
Looks better.
There is a lot of hope. Our GDP is growing, but we need to grow our agricultural sector because it feeds about 70% of livelihood. So if we think the agriculture sector, we support it, then the economic status of livelihood will improve. Going forward, it looks better. However, we might have to wait. 2024 would be very good, better. But going forward, I think we are looking for improved status. However, if the demonstration, if we don't have a predictable political environment, economy is very sensitive to the socio environment. So if we don't have predictable economic space or environment, then we'll have a problem. Remember, Kenya is a gateway, is a leading shipment hub within East Africa. We almost go to what we call the high season for tourism. So the international, what we call direct foreign investments, they'll be looking at our political environment and see, do I go and invest in Kenya? Or in Tanzania, Uganda, where we can predict the political environment. Currently, as we speak, Uganda and Tanzania have overtaken us as they receive more direct foreign investment than us. Ethiopia is way, way, way ahead of us. Remember, there is a Dar es Salaam port in Dar es Salaam. There is Djibouti port. Tanzania is doing a railway from Dar es Salaam through Bagamoyo all the way to Kigali and Burundi. And significantly, we get a lot of business from the port of Mombasa. So if we don't put our act together, politically, then we might have significant loss in terms of even revenue and job losses.
I think it's a good point to wind up. I can see, I'm told our time is up, but I can see a lot of people have been following this conversation. And Judith Kawira says a very informative conversation, having a lot of communication to learn from the guests in studio. Great to watch and listen to Dr. Steve Gashie and Samuel as they break down on the current situation. Ambrose says he's watching from Chogoria, all the way from Chogoria, says Dr. Steve Gashie and Samuel Karibuni Sana, KAK TV, and we are great to hear from you on what is the current state of the country, and a lot of feedback, of course, in regards to the conversation. That shows how much the fear of taxation and the topic of discussion is directly involved to the Kenyan people. But on that point is where I want us to wind up this particular conversation. I think Dr. Gashie gave his final remarks as well. Maybe you would say a final remark as we wind up this conversation, maybe 30 seconds or so.
Yes, in 30 seconds. And being the frequency here is religious because it's KAK TV. So I would like to encourage Kenyans that the country called Kenya is in the heart of God. And the future, he has good plans for us. We've been in this political storm in the past, and by the grace of God, God helps us to go through. I am sure that the wisdom of God will prevail, and the country is going to forge forward because we are a role model to many countries in Africa. There are countries who are looking at us, including our neighbors, to see how we are going to get out of these things. But I'm sure that God has good plans for us. Zephaniah 3, I think, verse 10, talks about the country beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And I am sure that geographically, it is this country. Kenya belongs to God.
Kenya belongs to God.
Yes.
Right, and that is where we went up. I can see a message from Mchungaji Reverend is saying, Dr. Gashie and Mheshimiwa Samuel Gabushwa, congratulations for coming KAK TV, and thank you for coming to enlighten our viewers as well. And I'll say thank you so much for making time this evening for us to have this conversation. Samuel Gabushwa is a politician as well.
From Laikipia.
From Laikipia. And you can also tell them you also vied for the senatorial seat.
Yes, I vied for the senatorial seat in 2017, Jubilee nomination. But I lost 2022. I supported another guy. Then Tukarambwa. Kikaturamba.
Right, and on the far right is Dr. Gashie, is an economic analyst, and also we talked about his appointment as the economic advisor in Nairobi County. Congratulations, and thank you so much for making time this evening. And I hoping that this is not the end of our conversation. We'll be back here again on the Governance Digest. Actually, this was the premiere of the Governance Digest. So I'm glad to have both of you in the premiere of this particular program. And thank you so much. I hope we have this conversation back and forth as we talk about what is happening in the country. Of course, maybe in 2025 we'll also have you here to try and look what before even before that, what you told us in 2022, whether in 2023 whether it will be the same as what will be panning out. And thank you so much, viewers, for making time to listen in and get a glimpse of what our conversation has been this evening. My name is Chris Sam, and I hope to see you next week on Thursday at 8 p.m. every Thursday. We'll be talking matters to do with governance, policies, politics, and leadership as we dissect and digest for you here on Governance Digest. Goodbye and good night for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This morning.
Look at you.
Thank you.